سلام مردم ایران. Sad Boshi. I went from the train from the airport to uh, downtown Vancouver, and I stayed in a hostel that was on the main strip called Granville Street. And I didn't know anything about it before. I just knew that it was a cheap hostel. I needed to find a place to live, so I was going to stay there until I found it. And I got out. It was Saturday night. I was so tired. I'd just come from Budapest, and it was like a ridiculously long flight, and there was so many different layovers. And then just walking down the street, seeing kind of like drug addicts like around, and like everyone was chaotic, and it was just sort of dirty, and it wasn't what I thought Vancouver would be, but it's all like the party, like the neon lights and the clubs are down this strip. And pre-COVID, like everyone's out on a Saturday night, and I've just got my suitcase walking down, and it was a bit overwhelming. And it just, wasn't like this glossy, like Canada, everyone's lovely. It was just a bit, yeah, like it reminded me, I've been to LA. It just reminded me a bit like LA, like everyone's sort of, do you have any money? And people like hassling people on the street. I'm like, what is going on? It was just a bit dirty and grimy. And then it took me a few days before I ventured out and took a bus like over one of the bridges that gets you, I guess, out of the downtown island here in Vancouver. And then I got to see the beaches and the houses, and I could see the mountains, and I was like, okay, like this is a lot better than that street that I was staying in. So probably wasn't the best way to start my time in Canada, but then thank goodness I have explored a lot more than the downtown, because there's a lot more than just that. So that was a bit of a shock. It was just sort of, yeah, not fun.
Yeah. سلام خدمت
Okay.
همه بینندگان عزیز. در امروز در خدمت ساشا هستیم از مهاجری از استرالیا که به کانادا اومده و میریم باش آشنا بشیم. Okay, Sasha, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself and when did you come here and just some stuff? Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Sasha. I am 29 years old. I am originally from Melbourne, Australia, and I moved over to Canada in August of 2018 to originally, yeah, pursue a film and TV career. So, yeah, I love acting, and there's a lot of opportunity here in Canada, especially Vancouver. So, yeah, that's the reason I came over here, and yeah, loving it.
And any special other from that you just said that for acting, any other special reason that you just choose Canada rather than the other countries like US and other big countries?
Um, Honestly, it's kind of, for Australians, we sort of choose between the Commonwealth. So a lot of my friends went to England, and I've been to England a few times to holiday, but for somewhere to live, it just didn't appeal to me, whether it be, I guess, the weather or the lack of, like, I don't know, sort of nature stuff. And I felt like I'd already seen London. And yeah, I guess career wise, it really was only Vancouver or Toronto for me. And Vancouver was the warmest of the two. So for an Australian, that's very important. And yeah, honestly, within the Commonwealth, there's like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, England, like the UK, and it is quite easy for us to get a 2-year visa. It really just took maybe an afternoon to fill that out, and then it's sort of just gifted to you. And I wish that everyone would take that opportunity. I think it's until you're 31 that is, yeah, just open for anyone, I guess, who doesn't have a criminal record in any of those countries, to have that chance to live there. And yeah, and a work permit. And then after the 2 years, it's really like you leave, or you have, applied to do permanent residency. Or I could have just finished my 2 years here and gone to the UK and done another 2 years. So that's why I had chosen Canada. But yeah, I mean, I who knows, maybe I'll still do the UK, because it's there for me if I want it. So that's cool.
Okay, so did you have a plan for your immigration or it just happened just suddenly?
I had been sort of warned by a few Australians, so the process does take a really long time. And I was actually working at a gift shop quite locally to me. And funnily enough, there was a girl who was working there as my manager, who was just going through the PR like immigration process, and said you should get onto it early, like sooner rather than later. And she was telling me this like 3 months into my time here. So it was quite overwhelming that she was kind of stressing about it. She'd been there longer than me. But yeah, I'd known her from university. She was in the year above me. So I trusted her opinion that I should get onto it. So at the beginning of 2019, I started looking at the process of what I needed to do and the point system and everything here in Canada. So I did start it early, and thank goodness I did, because I wouldn't have been able to get it otherwise, I don't think, or I would have had to finish it back in Australia. And I didn't really want to uproot my life again, go back home, do it, and then come back, which a lot of people, I think, especially with the pandemic, did have to do. They had to leave and finish it up back home. So, yeah, didn't really have a plan, but I got warned early. So, and then it was up to me to do my own research. So, yeah.
Thank you. And what are the main differences between here and Australia? Any culture shock, anything that you just came here by any chance and just saw that it's really big difference between here and there?
Yeah, there's a few. Like, I think I've been lucky enough to do a lot of traveling in my time to mainly Europe, and pretty much every country in Europe speaks a different language. So the language was great. That was no culture shock, and a lot of like the Western similarities were pretty easy. But I think it's mainly just I didn't realize that Canada would be as Americanized as it was. I thought for some reason that it would be kind of separate, but a lot of like, I don't know. I think just the tipping culture, the wages, like they're very much work, and for not too much gain. Whereas in Australia, it's more like we get paid quite well, and the lifestyle's sort of more relaxed. We get a lot more holiday time. So I think that was a bit of a shock that people like work 3 jobs here, and they're always working so hard, and then they don't seem to get much of the payoff, which is, having a vacation or whatever. So yeah, and like uh yeah, like structurally, like the architecture's a little bit different. I feel like Vancouver's quite a new city, and potentially, Toronto, like I've been there for a holiday, but that would probably be a bit more in Melbourne's sort of architecture, especially in the city. Like I mean, technically Melbourne's pretty young too, but a lot of the buildings are still from the 1800s there, like churches and train stations and things like that. And there is that rich history in Sydney and Melbourne. They're like the oldest cities in Australia. So Vancouver just seemed a lot more new, like it is new. There are just condos everywhere. And I think that was just a bit of a difference, but nothing too shocking.
And how big is the Australian community in here, in Canada?
I think it was very big before the pandemic. Unfortunately, a lot had to leave with the whole like PR, like yeah, they just didn't know what to do, so they sort of up and left. But to be honest, I haven't. The community was a lot stronger pre 2020, and a lot do come to Canada for the skiing, like the snow sports. Like we do get snow in Australia, but it is so expensive, and it's sort of like a rich man's thing to do. Like if your family grew up doing it, going to the snow, I think that's the only way that you would get to experience that. So I think when people finish high school or university in Australia, they do the 2 years in Canada to do that nature element of it. Like those who don't go to London, if they do come to Canada, I think that they do a lot more of the experiences. Like they live in Banff, or they live in places like Whistler, and there are heavy Australian communities there because of that 2 year visa. But now, like day to day, like through work or, going shopping, I rarely hear Australian accents like in downtown Vancouver. And if I do, I'm like really shocked, and I just want to be like, oh, where are you from? And it's usually like middle aged, like people who've been here, like they're married in a Canadian, or they've, they've just been here for a long time. It's so, I feel like the young people have sort of dispersed, or they've just gone home. But as soon as everything opens up, they'll all be back. Let me tell you, they'll all be coming back. So
Could you just compare the living costs between here and Australia? Is it
Oh,
cheaper and more expensive than?
I think you sort of get more, uh, like in terms of rent is similar, but I think because the wages, so just say like the majority of my friends back home being a teacher or in nursing or being a physiotherapist, things like that, those jobs you're looking at around like between at least 65 thousand a year to around like 85,000 a year. They're around that. Like that's minimum wage. Like I don't have many friends that would make less than that. And comparatively, I know some teachers in Vancouver would make around 40 or 45. So the wages take care of the cost of living in Melbourne, especially. Like Melbourne is a very expensive city to live in. Sydney's worse, but if you're living, in like rural Australia, like in a city that like Adelaide or Perth, which aren't very popular, people don't think of those when they first come to Australia. Like you'll be able to find a house that you could actually buy because the wages would accommodate you to be able to buy a house and a car and have that lifestyle. But yeah, like rent is similar. Food, like the produce that you get back home, a lot of it is local. So even if you're paying around the same, like supermarket shops are around the same, I would say around like $100 on average if you do like a weekly shop. But the produce that I find here, a lot of it's from Mexico or California because obviously can't grow too much in British Columbia. So yeah, I think you just pay a lot more here with taxes, with like the US and stuff that you may not in Australia because we just kind of have a lot of the agriculture and things already there. And if we're getting stuff exported from China, it's a lot cheaper. So the quality may not be there, but we can afford to sort of furnish a house for a lot cheaper than maybe somewhere in Canada. But yeah, I don't know. I think it overall it is more expensive to live here because you're constantly working and like fighting for more money to like survive, if that makes sense. So I think back home you can be a little bit more comfortable with money.
Okay. And how hard is finding a desired job? For example, any great opportunity that just match with your degree or actually occupation? Is that really hard to just find that, or no? It's easier to find it in here, Canada, rather than Australia.
Mm. Well, unfortunately, I've chosen a career in the arts. So, doing film and TV acting is very difficult, regardless of where you live, to find a job. So, I think there are way more opportunities within that field here for sure. So, even if you weren't like specifically acting, you could be on set working for a TV show with camera or editing video, like videography, all of those sorts of fields, like not being on screen, but behind the scenes. A lot of people will move from Australia for that opportunity because there are a lot more here. Like there are TV shows being filmed everywhere all the time and a lot of big head offices for Netflix and stuff in Vancouver. But yeah, so arts is difficult wherever. I think if I had pursued my journalism degree, which I did back home, at the end of my degree, there was that opportunity that I could go straight into a reporting role. Like I had to move more into the country, but it was sort of given to me, and I said no because I didn't feel right taking something that I wasn't obsessed with. So then I ended up moving to Canada. So I think if you do a more practical degree, like just from my experience back in Australia with all my friends and family members, they who did something like nursing, teaching, accounting, there's that experience you get from university that sort of it either gets you straight into work or gives you everything you need to go into a career. So from that element, it's quite easy and you can work your way up quite well, especially if the degree is quite well known and people are like, like pretty much everyone who comes out from that degree will be someone who's good for this role, I guess. But I've never studied in Canada, so I don't know what the opportunities would be like going from a university straight into work. But the job market overall at the moment is quite dire in both countries, from what I've heard. But I just think generally you can get picked up quite easily in Vancouver for a job, but it may not be the job that you want, I guess, like the dream job.
Have you experienced any racism in Canada, or just have you
um,
seen someone just get hurt by this?
I have heard stories for sure in Canada. I am blessed with being Caucasian. So, unless it's about being, I've definitely been spoken to in different ways as a female. But apart from that, yeah, I'm blessed that I don't have that element happening to me. And it makes me sick that it still occurs day to day. And in Canada, I had a coworker, and she was maybe third generation Canadian. Her grandparents were from the Philippines. And when coronavirus started, she had people moving away from her on transit, people like yelling at her, saying that she'd brought COVID over and things like that, which doesn't make any sense on any part. So I remember her not wanting to come into work around that time because she was scared to get on a bus. And that was heartbreaking to hear. And having to navigate that, I'd never been as a manager in the position of having a worker deal with racism like that. And yeah, like it didn't happen at the workplace, thank goodness. But it's just awful hearing that. So, and yeah, I know that another one of my coworkers, she's originally from Colombia, and she has quite dark skin. She's beautiful, but she had told me of a story where someone had called out a few different names to her at one of our work locations. This happened a couple of years ago. And she was trying to laugh it off, said it was fine because she didn't feel threatened. But I just couldn't believe that happened. And I wasn't on shift. So it was awful that I had to hear that had happened when I wasn't there. But apart from that, I haven't seen anything with my two eyes personally. But I know that it's definitely happening, and it's still something, even though this city is so multicultural and diverse, like it's still sadly happens. So I just hate that it's still so common. So yeah.